Hopefully this will be enlightening for you guys, entertaining, and I hope that I'll be able to share some personal experiences with you guys, and yeah, let's just see how it goes. But first of all, before I start, I've been thinking a lot about questions from last time about like, well, what can we do, things that we can change, and something that I would like to change myself. So just kind of as a thing before we get started, as like kind of a theme. So I find myself a lot saying statements like this. So I think that he's great, but yada, 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 I think this and this and this, And so there's that whole but, right? Okay. And in therapy, with couples, we'd like to help our couples to talk to each other, not using but statements, but using and, okay? So it kind of helps with the whole like, okay, I feel this when you do this, and I still love you, instead of saying like, but I still love you, besides things. And so this sort of but kind of creates like a dichotomous mindset, and we're all trying to work through the gap, right? Okay, so we're all in here. And so I think the and will really help us, making these and statements will really help us to kind of understand a little bit more about other people and understand about ourselves, and to become more accepting and loving towards people who are different from us, okay? And so just a little review over what Fred was talking about last time. This kind of relates to this. So I love what Fred was saying about how there's a lot of things where I was like, preach, And then there was also things where I was like, okay, I don't really agree with that, or I have a different perspective. And so I would just like to go over and let you guys know that not every minority has the same perspective on things. And so that's great that we have his perspective on, being in, and he's also different. He's an immigrant. I'm not an immigrant, And so his experiences as an immigrant and marrying interracial, having an interracial marriage, and then and then my experiences as an Asian American growing up here in America. Okay, so just any questions about that? This is just what I kind of want to go off today. So, no? Okay, good. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Asian American stereotypes, and how perfect is that picture? On a Time magazine too, come on. But we're going to be going over a little bit of Asian American stereotypes, and I just wanted to just again with the whole Hawaii thing, what are some stereotypes? We're in a safe spot. I'm here to help explain why we have these stereotypes. And so what are some stereotypes about Asian people? Oh, they're smart, right? What else?
They don't know how to drive.
Yeah, we don't know how to drive. What else? But mostly smart, right? Smart, good at math, good at science, computer, stuff like that, right? So and I remember growing up and thinking oh, there are no bad stereotypes about Asian people. Oh, everyone thinks that we're really smart. I mean, there's a whole we can't drive, which I would just like to say, I've been to Asia and I'm wow, you guys can park. If there is space, there will be space for your car. And I'm and I've also moved here, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I'm just I know how to use my blinker, okay? I don't know about the people here, but anyways, that's just my little road rage coming out. So, talking about that, I'm going to talk, oh wait, go this way. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the model minority myth, okay? That's a perfect little meme right here. It's the, what is it? I forgot what the meme is called. It's Stern Asian Father or something like that. But, so the model minority myth, just up here, the myth is that minorities can achieve us, the Asian American minority, we achieve more socioeconomic success than the population average, and the success is defined by education, income, family stability, and low crime rates. And you can read the quote if you'd like. But basically, you have this myth where, okay, Asians are so smart and they do well. They do well economically, and they also, they work hard and they do all this stuff, and they're naturally smart, and so they're gifted. And so you have us as a model, right? And then we are pitted against other minorities. So when other people look at minorities, to be oh, you can't complain because of your minority status, because look at the Asian people, like they're doing great, you know, they're going to college, they're doing all this stuff, how come you can't as well? And so that is one of the things. Okay, so, and of course it's not true. Even though Asian Americans are the most educated, like population-wise, we're most likely to go to college, there are other things that are overlooked because of this myth. For example, in New York City, Asian Americans have the highest rate of poverty in the city. Okay, so it's definitely not true, but things like this get overlooked because of this myth. And so, just thinking out loud. So, what are some downfalls of the model minority myth? Like, yes, sorry.
So I remember learning about this in elementary school actually. Which is
Mhm.
really cool.
That's great.
So would be. But so even positive stereotypes towards any like group of people can have negative impacts on those who don't necessarily fall under that stereotype.
Yes,
So
very
it's
true.
like certain people feel excluded.
Yeah. So think about all this pressure you have to be a straight A student, to be smart, not only from your parents, but from society. So for example, a lot of Asian American kids get bullied in school. There's high rates of suicide, especially in Asian American women. And also there's something called the bamboo ceiling effect. Okay, so even though Asian Americans are more likely to, you know, find a good job and whatnot, they're unlikely to be put in CEO positions. They're more middle management jobs. And so that's what they call the bamboo ceiling effect, is that they can't push past their sort of like average jobs to get to like leadership positions. And that's what it's been seen. A lot of things that happen. So for myself, growing up as an Asian American, I suck at math, like hardcore suck at math. And I remember feeling like, wait, I'm Asian, I'm supposed to be good at this, right? And kind of feeling down on myself because I was not able to do it. So there is a lot of pressure that happens to us, and also because at least in my culture, that you don't tell your problems to other people. Like seeing therapists is not really a thing, you know, and whatnot. And so when you don't have anyone to talk to, except for your family, who kind of gives you this expectation to do well, then it like really, you have a lot of mental issues after that. So Emma did a great job talking about key values about collectivism, which I will talk about that. I will skip over because she did a good job of that. Also that house that she showed with the courtyard house, like my husband's family on his mom's side, they still live in one because they're really traditional, so which is great and I love it. So yay, parent-child relationships. Let's see, we don't have much time. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about having going through this. We had this at the beginning, the first day of class, remember, and we talked about the majority and the minority. I'm going to talk a little bit about the minority identity development. So these are all things that I went through growing up as an Asian American child. Okay, so conformity, right? So I remember when I was younger, in middle school, like my mom would prepare lunches for me that I love to eat. And I remember feeling so embarrassed that people would be like, what's that smell? Like, what is that? Like, that smells really bad, you know? And I would feel so embarrassed that I would throw away my food and like just not want to eat it because I was just so embarrassed. And like, I was just like in my Big Fat Greek Wedding, that little clip with her sandwiches, that's exactly how I felt. And I felt kind of mad when I grew up and seeing how everyone's like, oh, Asian fusion, Korean barbecue tacos, or like, you know, Asian fusion food, it's so good. And I'm like, okay, where were you when I was younger? I felt such, I don't know, it was a lot of shame that came from having a really different Western culture that I grew up in school and then having a very strong Eastern culture at home. And so I went through a lot of these things, dissonance when I started to like realize like, okay, there's a lot of things going on right now where I have two dominant cultures in my life, right? And then resistance and immersion. My sister is a great example of resistance because before her mission, so I'm the oldest child, and then my brother has autism, so we didn't speak Chinese growing up. And so when I was younger, I could still understand a little bit Chinese and speak it, and then I forgot it all after he was born. But my sister got like none of that, and so she hated when my mom would talk to her in Chinese, and she doesn't like rice, you know, and she's like very against that. She served her mission in Taiwan, so she's still like, she had the immersion section as well. Same with me. We both went back to kind of mesh with our roots again. And then you have other things like introspection and awareness and whatnot, and I'll talk a little bit about that maybe at the end. So before I talk about representation, which is a great thing, okay, very, very strong problem in Asian American society. Okay, so the whole idea of Asian American, okay, when we're talking Asian, we're talking like tons of people, tons of different cultures, and yet when people say Asian American, they usually refer to Chinese Americans, right? Chinese, maybe Korean or Japanese Americans, but you don't really think about, when you think Asian American, you don't think Indians, you don't think Indonesian, you don't think Filipino, you know, those things are, and so sadly for this presentation, also in the Pacific Islanders they also have Asian ancestry as well. But so sadly for this presentation, when I say Asian American, I am referring to Chinese Americans because I am Chinese American, but I would just like to kind of put that in your brain that sometimes we feel invisible because we are grouped together and with so many different people, and I have some examples of that later. On my mission, I actually had experiences of like racism and microaggressions as an Asian American in Taiwan, okay? So my companion was blonde and super awesome and had great Chinese and everything. And every time we would talk to someone, she'd be like, oh yeah, I'm from America. And I'd be like, oh, I'm from America too. And then every time they would be like, oh, but you don't look like her. And I'd be like, you know, like I am American. And that's in Taiwan. When I was living there just to teach Chinese. No, sorry, I didn't teach Chinese. I taught English, and I was learning Chinese. I remember applying for a job, and they actually offered me a lower wage because I was not white. And even though I had perfect English, and they were like, oh, we're looking for someone who has more of a European face. And I was like, so you're gonna hire the guy from Belgium who has an accent and not the girl who has a perfect American accent. So it is very prevalent, and it's hard when you're Asian American because people are like, oh, you're so Asian, and then you're so American. I'm like, well, what am I, you know? Let's see. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about representation. Let's see. Off the top of your head, can anyone name me 5 Asian American or Asian actors who do not do Kung Fu or martial arts? And it's okay if you don't. I ask this question a lot, and not very many people can. Or any names. There you go, right? So, Crazy Rich Asians, right? All of them don't do Kung Fu, except for Michelle Yeoh, who was in Crouching Lion, the Hidden Tiger. Huh? Yes, there you go, good one. Awkwafina she's also in Crazy Rich Asians. She's the Asian Ellen in that movie. And I'll talk a little bit about Crazy Rich Asians in a little bit. But just a little thing for you to help kind of realize like how little representation we have in Hollywood. The fact that like even I had a hard time doing this, it's very hard, okay? And a lot of problems we see in Hollywood right now, whitewashing characters, okay? So we have people who are white who play characters who are supposed to be Asian, right? So in Doctor Strange, you have Tilda Swinton playing I don't know what she was, like a Buddhist person, right? From Tibet, in Tibet, but she was white. So weird. You have Scarlett Johansson, is that her name? She was playing a character in a movie called Ghost, and which is a Japanese film, and starring a white character playing an Asian character. And also, I guess, I didn't know this before, but Emma Stone was also in a movie called Aloha, and that character was supposed to be Hapa Haole, which means that she's half white, half like Asian Hawaiian mix, but she's clearly full white, so, you know. And then Avatar, The Last Airbender, I just love that TV series, but that movie was terrible. Okay, yeah, terrible. Okay, so since we can't name any, can anyone name any of these people up here? These are very, well, more of the prominent these are Asian American actors, not.
I can tell you what movies.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's name off movies.
Can anyone name any names though? Any names?
It's like I know he's from Hawaii Five-0. I want to say like Daniel, but I can't remember his
Yes,
last name.
you're right. Daniel Day Kim.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. So here we have, actually most of these are Korean Asian Americans. So Arden Cho, she's in Teen Wolf. John Cho, he's Star Trek. He's Captain Sulu, which is supposed to be a Japanese character, I guess, whatever. We have Sung Kang. He's Korean, sorry. Korean American, he's in Fast 5. Ken Jeong, also in Crazy Rich Asians, Korean American. Constance Wu is in Fresh Off the Boat, same with Randall Park, and they're both, Randall Park is Korean American, Constance is Taiwanese American. We have Pat Morita from Karate Kid, Margaret Cho, Ryan Higa, he used to be from Niga Higa, he was the top subscribed person on YouTube for a long period of time. He is Japanese American from Hawaii. And then, yeah, Lucy Liu, we have a lot of people here. But no one knows their names now, do we? We know where they're from, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to know this because I'm not expecting you to know every actor's name either, but you do know a lot of actors' names, right, in Hollywood just because it comes up, and sadly not a lot of Asian American names come up as well. So one of the things with Crazy Rich Asians, which I'll talk about right now, is, by the way, who has seen this? Okay, if you have not seen this, it is your homework to go and watch it, because not only is it a great film, it's hilarious, and you don't have to be Asian to get it, but you'll understand it way more if you're Asian. But it was really funny, wasn't it? It was a really good film. One of the critiques about Crazy Rich Asians is, once again, you have Asian people playing mostly Chinese and mostly Chinese people, right? Actually, Ken Jeong is Korean American. He's not Chinese at all. Constance is, and so is a couple other characters. But remember the gay cousin in Crazy Rich Asians? He is Filipino, and so you have, once again, kind of that Pan-Asian blend without sort of separating, okay, you're not actually Chinese. And in most scenes that happens as well. In most movies, you have some Korean playing a Chinese person or a Japanese playing just whatever they can get, pretty much. So, okay, I really would love to show. Okay, let's try and do this part. Okay, so Awkwafina, she is one of the characters on Crazy Rich Asians, and she was on SNL for the, let's see if I don't remember where.
My dad still lives.
Okay, sorry, I didn't measure this ahead of time, but.
Very unsettling. No, before we start.
Okay, perfect. And she's going to talk a little bit about representation in her life.
I just want to say, and this is a true story, back in 2000, I came here to 30 Rock and waited outside when my idol, Lucy Liu, hosted SNL. I was a kid, yes.
Lucy Liu is the first Asian American woman on SNL.
I was a kid and I didn't have a ticket, so I knew I wasn't getting in, but I just wanted to be near the building. And I remember how important that episode was for me and how it totally changed what I thought was possible for an Asian American woman. And standing here tonight is a dream I never thought would come true. So thank you, Lucy, for opening the door. I wasn't able to make it in the building back then, but 18 years later, I am hosting the show.
Okay. Just letting you know, she is the second Asian American woman after Lucy Liu to host the show. And yeah, it's been a long time. So that's a little bit about that. And okay, I'm trying to, there's so many good things to talk about. Okay, so I'm gonna let this run. This is the cast. Just a little background. So Crazy Rich Asians is the first film in 25 years to have an all Asian cast and as a major Hollywood film. Okay. Okay, the last one was Joy Luck Club. That was 25 years ago. So this is a big deal, and let's listen to some of the things they have to say.
I've waited a very long time, and the last one was 25 years ago with Joy Luck Club.
It is a dream come true to be part of a movie that is such, it's a cultural marker. Like everybody's gonna remember this movie.
I grew up in Malaysia.
I'm from London.
Richmond, Virginia.
Hometown Melbourne. I'm Australian if you can't tell from the accent.
I grew up in Hong Kong.
I grew up on the east coast of Malaysia.
I grew up in England.
Silicon Valley, Los Altos Hills, California.
I am from Queens, New York.
I come from a really small mining city in Malaysia called Ipoh.
I was born on the island of Singapore, and then I was forcibly removed by my dad and planted into suburban Houston, Texas.
Even though when I was in pre-med at Duke, I had this yearning to be an actor. I just didn't know if that could be a viable profession, or so my dad told me.
I walked into a casting studio. I was talking to them and they're like, "Can you do a Chinese accent?" Back then I was just like, "Yeah." And so I did one and they're like, "Great, come in tomorrow and let's have you dub the new Jackie Chan film."
I think when I was a young child, I never imagined that one day I would be on the silver screen.
I did stand-up comedy for a long time in San Francisco, and then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna move to Los Angeles and try and make it. And I had no intention of acting. I came down here just to really do the comedy thing, and then acting just sort of happened.
I went to Australia for law school, which is undergraduate in Australia, and after law school I started doing stand-up comedy. And I was doing stand-up comedy in Australia up till 2 years ago when I joined the Daily Show with Trevor Noah.
I went to college as an economics major because that was like the easiest major that can still please your Asian parents. And then to much of their dismay, I became a stand-up comedian just because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
I went to university, to college. I ended up studying law. I then auditioned for drama school in secret and only told my mum and dad when I got in. My dad said to me, "It doesn't matter how good you are or how talented you are, but how many faces do you see on the screen that look like ours?"
I remember growing up as a kid and not seeing a lot of people on the big screen or even behind the screen that looked like me. So it was always a hope and a dream to make it there, but knowing that it was a slim chance.
I auditioned for a show called Fresh Off the Boat, and it was huge to so many people. At the end of the day, the thing that I loved about it is that it's something that kids can watch with their families and feel like their stories matter.
As a kid, I always felt left out. I didn't see myself and my image in media, and it is quite damaging to self to not be validated, not see your own image represented.
When you have someone who looks like you, it's something you can kind of grab onto, and it makes you feel better about your place in the world. It makes you feel more secure about it.
Growing up in Malaysia, there wasn't really a problem with representation. We saw faces like ours on screen, and so it was only until I went back to the UK where I realized that, like, where did all these faces go?
I grew up in Singapore, and Singapore at the time, there was such an amazing flood of Asian movies, and there was, we had our own channels, we had our own TV shows, there were Asian soap operas on all the time. But then I moved to America when I was 11, and then there were none.
When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I saw Margaret Cho on Comedy Central. She was the first Asian American woman that I ever saw. She was funny without the influence of being Asian at all. She was just funny. And this would sound stupid now, but it meant something to me as a kid. She had perfect command of English. And I remember thinking, like, not that like, oh, well, she did it, I can do it, but like, oh, well, it can be done. It can be done.
I never thought in a million years I'd get a chance to write for my people for a major Hollywood movie. So I was in.
I did not. I think the whole industry did not realize how important this movie would be for not just Asian Americans, but contemporary Asian talents to have a movie that talks about them.
There's one thing to be deeply passionate about a film, but to be emotional about it from a cultural standpoint, I don't think I've ever felt this way.
I hope it presents a whole new chapter in Hollywood where we have much more inclusion, much more stories that showcase the diversity of, the full scope and range of who Asians are.
Asians from, the UK, Asians from America, Asians from Singapore, Asians from Australia, all of us are in this same room making a big
studio Hollywood movie, it just felt really special, and all of us were so much on the same page.
We became a family, and we were all passionate about creating something that was more than a movie, that, like John says, was a movement.
One cool thing about the movie is that it shows Singapore as a character in the film, the way New York is a character in a Woody Allen film. Because usually when Hollywood goes to Asia, it's because James Bond goes there for like a one-night stand and then he leaves the next day.
There's nobody doing martial arts in this movie. There's nobody fleeing villages. You know what I mean? We just get to be really awesome people.
John Chu showed me the dailies, and I cried, and I couldn't tell if it was coming from like an actress standpoint or an Asian American, someone who's lived in this country with so little representation. And I realized that that is the power, the privilege of having representation in a country where you grew up in and that you love so much.
Okay, so we don't have time to watch the whole thing, but reactions. Christina.
I could sense like the pride that they felt, even though it's like not my culture, and that was something that made me proud about my own culture.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Any other reactions? Yes.
I think it caused a little bit more awareness, like, it's like this is making me feel good, but then I kind of like clicked in my head where I was like thinking about my favorite TV shows and then being like, okay, how many minority characters at all are even in my shows, and being like, okay, maybe I can name one, and like what role do they actually, you know, play in the movie, and so it just made me a little bit more aware.
Yeah, thank you. I came out of this movie like in tears because for the first time I saw a movie that, because I was in the movie theater and it was packed and we were like the only Asian people there, but we walked out and the whole time, every joke, everyone's like laughing, they're having a good time, and it just made me feel so proud of where I come from and also very happy to see that other people can enjoy my culture as well, and that as an Asian person, I'm not restricted to law, economics. You can tell how all of them have a very strong like college background in something else because of the family thing and how much of a struggle that is to kind of do something that you want. But I also, I don't know, it's kind of hard, but I remember, this is not, this is like Polynesian Americans, but I remember in BYU Hawaii, I had a teacher from Fiji, and he has like the cutest little daughter, and she has like super, super curly black hair, and he was saying when Moana came out, how happy she was that she had a princess that had her hair, and that how sad she was when she couldn't be Rapunzel for Halloween because of her hair. And that just like broke my heart because I was like, I understand, like, okay, how many Disney princesses can I be? I can maybe pull off Pocahontas and I can be Mulan, which I was for a long time. And just how special it is to have a film where you can see like, there's a scene where they're playing mahjong with each other and I was like, that's my family, you know? And just to be able to relate so strongly and have other people relate and be like, we are not just so foreign, you know, we have families, we have family troubles, and it was really beautiful. So the last little bit, anyways, yes, please go watch this film if you have an opportunity. It comes out on DVD today or yesterday. If I could, I would just have us watch it in class because it's so funny, but yeah, it's great and I really love it. But so just a little talk about just before we end about some of the struggles that I've had as an Asian American living here. And this is one of them. I am Chinese American, so I actually have the privilege of like being the person that they assume that they're talking to most of the time. The whole, let's see, it's hard to, how do I explain it? But I'll just talk a little bit about this. For example, I have a lot of friends who are Asian Americans, but from different cultures, and so Korean, Japanese, Filipino, tons, and like Vietnamese and everything. And it kind of like, they feel like whenever you ask, oh, where are you from? You can't say, I'm from Seattle, you know, like, oh, but my parents are from Taiwan and Hong Kong, right? And it's hard when you aren't believed that you are part of this country, and people are like, oh yeah, you're American too. But I'm like, well, I have to hyphenate, you know, I have to be Asian American. And just the whole "and" thing. And there are things I like about it, that I am so fluid between both cultures, and I appreciate it. I think it's a great asset to have, but it has been a struggle to get here. When I was growing up, I grew up mostly at church. We were the only Chinese family in the whole stake. And so there was that. I remember when I was growing up, when I went to stake dances, no boy would ever ask me to dance. And so I would be surrounded by all of my, you know, beautiful Caucasian friends, and they're wonderful people, and one by one, a boy would come and ask them to dance, and then I would be the last one. And I used to think like, oh, maybe it's because I'm awkward. Maybe because I'm just, you know, not good looking, and, you know, I can accept that, you know, or I just don't know these people, or I don't know, it's just, I was trying to find a reason for it. And then my younger sister, who is tall, slim, like, I'm the fattest one in my family. So you also have that whole thing of like, they're like, wow, you gained weight. And I'm like, I know. So, but my sister, who's tall, slim, beautiful, and, you know, very social, she went through the same thing. She told me how her best friends, who were also Caucasian, would also be all asked by different boys to dance. And then she ended up thinking like, am I awkward? Am I weird? Like, what's wrong with me? And it was really hard, being so noticeably different from other people. And sometimes it can be kind of scary. But so there's that. I talked about the food thing. I remember they would, like, I like distinctly remember this one time when I was younger in elementary school, there was a boy who went like this to me, and I was like, okay, boy, I don't do this to you. So like, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing? You know, and that's a very strong memory in my brain. One time I was on a plane, and they had asked if someone would want to come up and would be volunteered to take a later flight. And I was like, oh yeah, sure, I have time, and I want a voucher. So, but then last minute they called me on the plane, and I was like, okay, I'll just, you know, go at the time I was thinking of. And I get on the plane, and there's this Caucasian male, and he had bought 2 seats, but his wife didn't end up coming. So he was arguing that he had bought 2 seats, and I was there. And so I got there, and I was like, oh, sorry, that's my seat. And he's like, no, I bought this seat. And I was like, okay. So me being like the non-confrontational person, conflict avoidant person I am, I walked back. I was like, hey, like, he says I don't have a seat. And I was shunted back and forth, and they had closed the gates, so I couldn't get off the plane. And then they had like talked to him. They're like, oh, you know, just like, you can't, like, we're legally allowed to give your seat away if there doesn't blah, blah, blah. And so I sat down, and then later on, a flight attendant came and talked to that guy and was like, oh, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Like, here, let's give you a voucher for like $500 for next flight. And I was sitting there like waiting, and she never talked to me about anything. And I was like, and I didn't click right away, but it didn't hit me until later, because I was so mad. I was like, wait, why does he get a voucher when I was also very inconvenienced as well? And I'm not saying that like, I didn't buy 2 tickets, I realized that, but why was I not offered one? Because I didn't make a scene, because he had made a scene, but I didn't make a scene. And so, and just because, oh, she must be okay with it, so we're just going to not talk about that. And I was like, that was something that stuck with me, and I didn't realize that it was actually not just me. I don't know, that there were other dimensions to that event that were much deeper than I thought. And then once I learned about more to do with microaggressions and everything, I realized like, okay, that's kind of what happened there, you know? Just like, oh, she's not, like, the Asian person is very like submissive, so we're just not gonna deal with it. And finally, just before we finish, I just like to talk about why, like, what are some of the differences of moving here and living in Provo and being in the most homogenous place I've ever lived in. And I hope some of these stories will like help you understand. And I don't think any of you are bad people. And when I say like coming here, I feel this is nothing to do on your personal character. That's what I hope. I just would like to share my experiences. So when I was at BYU Hawaii, we were telling friends that we were moving here to Utah, and I remember I had 3 friends tell me some experiences that really, really scared me. And one of them was a student. She was here as an undergrad, and she's from Taiwan. So these are all immigrant students. And so she was here in Taiwan. She was here from Taiwan, and she was writing papers in her classes, and her teacher kept failing every single one of them. And so she went to her teacher and was like, "Hey, like, I keep trying, like, what can I do to do better?" And then the teacher would just kind of blow her off and not do anything about it. And then finally she was like, okay, so she edited her paper the way he said to. She turned it in again, and he still failed her. And she basically found out that this teacher had a stereotype against Asian immigrant, just foreign students coming here. Basically, he just assumed that they all had terrible English, and she was unable to get a good grade. And she went about it really well. She went down, sat with him, and was like, "I'm doing everything you tell me to, and you're still failing me. So let's work together and figure this out." And I thought that was really, really brave of her, because I would have not reacted that way. And then I had 2 similar experiences from my other friends. My Relief Society president in BYU Hawaii is from Japan, and she's the sweetest girl ever. And she told me how after her mission, she moved to the Provo area and lived here for a little bit. And she was walking down the street, and these teenage boys across the street started throwing rocks at her and yelling obscenities at her, and just very terrible things. And then we had and she's the nicest person I've ever met in my life. And then I had another friend who is Taiwanese, came here as an exchange teacher, and she was walking down the street, and out of a car, people like just driving by and like spit on her, like as she was walking on the street, not doing anything. And I know it's really shocking, because you think like, what, I live in this community, how can this happen? And I know it's so just like with the whole, it's hard for me to kind of think about this, like that happened, and there are still good people in this world, but I guess, I don't know, but this is where I'm going to use but this happened, and we need to do something about it, right? And this is why it's been hard for me living here. Even my husband, I invited him to come and speak, and he said no, because he felt uncomfortable. And it's not because of the class, but he has been afraid to go to the store alone. He has been like, and he doesn't admit it out loud, but he's just been really like freaked out a lot. And because of moving here, and because he feels so aware of how alone he is. And these are just the stories that I just like to tell you, and I don't want to like give you many solutions, but I just hope that these stories can help you to understand that these things still happen today, and it does hurt a lot of people, and there are things that we can do to kind of ease that pain for other people. Lastly, I know it's, oh shoot, we're already a minute over, but this is just something I read online that I really liked about empathy. It says, "Let me hold the door for you. I may have never walked in your shoes, but I can see your shoes are worn, your strength is torn, under the weight of a story I have never lived before. Let me hold the door for you. After all you have walked through, it is the least that I can do." So I hope that, I guess you can think about this for yourselves. And if you would like to come talk or to any person, and I really appreciate all of you, letting me have this experience to talk. I noticed that like half the students are missing for today, but that's okay. And thank you guys for making an effort. And yeah, this is the end of class. Thank you.